And now let's move on. Let's proceed to Yossra Ibrahim. Yossra is an Egyptologist specializing in ancient Egyptian astronomy. She received a BA majoring in Egyptology and minoring in entrepreneurship and history from the American University in Cairo, and a master's degree in archaeology from Durham University. She is currently a research associate at the research training group Early Concepts of Man and Nature, and a doctoral candidate at Johannes Gutenberg University, Mainz, researching the ancient Egyptian astronomical diagrams with a dissertation titled Lights of Eternity, Investigations into Concepts, Tradition and Innovation in the Ancient Egyptian Sky Diagrams. A main area of specialty concerned the astronomical activity in the ancient Egyptian society, particularly calendars, astronomical texts, and depictions dating from the New Kingdom up to the 2nd century AD. She is currently conducting her first field survey on a number of ancient Egyptian astronomical ceilings in Thebes. She presents the ancient Egyptian celestial diagrams between change and continuity. Thank you so much.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay,
but we can't see you. I don't know if you have your video disabled, but we can see your screen.
Can you see me?
Great, now we can see you.
Perfect. Okay. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I confirm we can see your screen and you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you very much for this introduction.
Just a moment, we're going to turn the volume up for the in-person, just a second. Okay.
Okay, can you hear me well?
Much better, thank you very much.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for this introduction. And today I'm going to present on the ancient Egyptian celestial diagrams. It's also part of my ongoing research, doctoral research, generously funded by the German Research Foundation. So basically what I'm trying to do is to survey a great number of these celestial diagrams dating from the New Kingdom or Dynasty 18 up to the 2nd century AD. So my research questions are kind of focused on change and innovation in these celestial diagrams. How did they start and change over time? What is the influence of the Greco-Roman period? How the zodiac was introduced and found its place among these classical images of the night sky. So the celestial diagram is a term denoting a set of stellar decorative illustrations that can depict a variety of stellar elements such as stellar deities, constellations, stars, and planets. The celestial diagram can decorate a number of can be found decorating a number of contexts such as the ceilings of private and royal tombs, the ceilings of temples. It can also occur in coffins or in coffin lids, and in some occurrences it can decorate the exterior surface of water clocks. Despite the variability of these sources, the actual surviving number of these celestial decorations is considered few, and they are actually a tip to a great amount of knowledge and information about how the ancient Egyptians visualized the night sky and perceived astronomical concepts. And perhaps they didn't start very elaborate like these examples, and the earliest simple illustrations come from these Middle Kingdom coffin lids dating roughly to Dynasty 12. And these coffin lids are known for housing the decan lists, and these decans are special stars easily identifiable that rise and set consecutively south of the ecliptic. The ancient Egyptians favored these stars and were utilized in timekeeping and calendars. So over the surface of this coffin lid, we have the decans inscribed diagonally, and towards the middle, we have a very simple illustration depicting the sky goddess Nut, a constellation of a bull depicted as a foreleg, the constellation Sah or Orion, and the star Soptet or the star Sirius. Most of the coffin lids from the Middle Kingdom look very similar to this example. However, more elaborate scenes and more elaborate astronomical diagrams survive in the New Kingdom, decorating ceilings in tombs. A very prominent example, and perhaps an important one that set its own family and its own tradition, comes from the unfinished tomb of Senenmut in Deir el-Bahri. And as we can see, this ceiling is divided into two parts, or two horizontal white panels, the southern panel, the northern panel. Each panel is framed by several rows of stars and bordered by these discs. In the middle, we have a 4-line prayer dedicated to Senenmut and also the titular of Queen Hatshepsut. The southern panel starts off with vertical lines or vertical columns listing down the names of the decans, the number of stars, and the name of the associated deity. On this panel, we can also spot several clusters and constellations, such as the boat, the ram, this peculiar egg-shaped constellation, and these two turtles, in addition to the personification of Sah or Orion, Cyrus, two falcon-headed figures presumably representing the planets Jupiter and Saturn. Planet Mercury is mentioned over this column and accompanied by a very small jackal-headed figure, and Venus here depicted as a heron bird. And moving on to the other side or the other panel, the northern panel is very distinctive as it has this special feature exclusive only to Senenmut, these 12 circles, presumably presenting the 12 months of the year. And over the ground line, we have a congregation of deities, and in the middle, we have this important group, the northern group. It's consistent on most of the celestial diagrams. So the group is composed of a striding female hippo with a crocodile on its back holding a mooring post and a small vertical crocodile. And please notice the composition of this hippo because it comes in a hybrid form. It has a lion's mane, leonine paws, human-like sagging belly and breasts, looking very monster-like. Other members of the groups, the anonymous man fighting a crocodile, is not holding any weapon. Another composite of a lion-headed crocodile, a falcon-headed figure holding a spear directed towards the constellation of the bull. In the previous example dating from the Middle Kingdom, this constellation was depicted as a four-leg. Here it has this oval-shaped body, a distinctive head of a bull, 4 short limbs, and a tail made up of 3 small stars connected to the ground line by what is usually interpreted as a pole. The New Kingdom is a very good source for these astronomical ceilings, and later on we see them in royal tomb context, and a very important example comes from the tomb of Seti I. It decorates the ceiling of the burial chamber. And perhaps at a first glance, we can perceive this one as more complete or more vivid due to the colors utilized. The blue color mimicking the color of the sky and the yellow color that stands out. Again, the ceiling is divided into 2 parts, south and north. Northern panel looks like a very organized table of decans and still has our clusters such as the bird with 4 deities on it, the ram on a very small scale this time, and the egg, which looks more like a twisted or curved circle. And again, we have our Sah Soptet, 3 falcon-headed deities, this time representing the planets Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. Mercury and Venus are also present over the last 2 columns. And of course, at the center of the northern panel, we have our northern group. And this time, perhaps the artist chose to stay away from any hybrids. The hippo takes the form of a striding female hippo. The bull has a full normal shape of a bull, and also the lion takes the shape of a full lion that's almost or completely outlined by stars. And also please note here the engagement of this falcon-headed figure with the bull. It's not holding a spear or any stick. It seems to be supporting the platform on which the bull is standing. So this is a new tradition or another family, the family of Seti. In the following examples dating from Dynasty 20 or these Ramesside tombs, we tend to see these astronomical ceilings again in royal tomb context. And we see the two traditions of Senenmut and Seti. A very important case study is KV9 because it doesn't only house one astronomical ceiling, but three. They decorate the ceilings of corridors B, C, and parts of pillared room F. The composition of corridors B and C is very similar in arrangement. Each ceiling is divided into three horizontal registers. The upper register, of course, has the decans and the clusters. The middle one has the northern group, and the final or the third register is Ramesside addition. It's the introduction of the Ramesside star clock, or another, and seems to be another attempt of accurately measuring time. The ceiling in corridor B follows the Seti tradition, while corridor C, it tends to follow the Senenmut tradition. And we also know the presence of the figures of the pharaoh kneeling or adoring characters, or these features connected to the god Osiris. Room F has this important ceiling depicting the fundamentals, of course, of stars or the Book of Nut. And our celestial diagrams are quite challenging to observe since they are depicted here behind these columns. But again, on each side we have these two diagrams. Each side follows a different tradition, either Senenmut or Seti, and also it has this Ramesside star clock. Another Ramesside tomb is KV1, and this time the ceiling or the diagram decorates the ceiling of the burial chamber. And a striking feature of this diagram is the presence of the double-arched figure of Nut, which serves the purpose of dividing the ceiling into two parts, and also features the birthing of the sun. And this time the ceiling is not divided into north and south, but it is divided into two traditions, or following two families, Seti and Senenmut. And we also have this Ramesside star clock. And a final Ramesside example is found in KV6, and it decorates the ceiling of chamber C. And here we also have this Ramesside feature of a double diagram, each side featuring a tradition, and we also have this Ramesside star clock. So what did the Ramessides do to our classical images of the sky? First of all, they seem to introduce these Ramesside star clocks, which are exclusive only to Dynasty 20 and only occur in these three tombs. The framework is extremely intriguing, as they observe a star and the reference is determined by the different body parts of a seated priest. The Ramessides also added this image of Nut, which divides the ceiling into two parts, features the birthing of the sun, and also perhaps gives this notion of protection. They also introduced this idea of a double diagram, or different visions of the sky. In the late period, most of the diagrams we have, they date to the Sayyid period, or the 25th and 26th dynasties. And most of these, they tend to follow the Senenmut tradition, or the Senenmut family. Sometimes a Nut is depicted stretched along the ceiling, but most of these, or all of these diagrams, tend to follow the Senenmut family. Sorry, I have a technical problem here. Yeah. In the Greco-Roman period, different ideas are introduced, and artistic agency also influences the way the figures and the characters are depicted, and shows and represents actually a creative process. So this early Ptolemaic diagram still includes the stretched figure of Nut, and also our classical images of the stellar characters, are still depicted. However, here, the way the constellation of the bull is depicted is very unique. In the Middle Kingdom, it took the form of a four-leg New Kingdom or the late period. It was also depicted as an oval-shaped bull or a full bull. In this case, we have the leg of the bull and the head of the bull, very reminiscent of the Middle Kingdom tradition. And with the introduction of the zodiac, we tend to see a personalized horoscope in the coffins. We still have the image of stretched newt, and on the sides of the coffin we have the 12 hours of the day and the 12 hours of the night, and the zodiac signs here show an ongoing engagement with the Egyptian tradition. For example, the sign Libra or the balance has a baboon on top, two plates, one with the heart and another one with the feather, very reminiscent or very evocative of the weighing of the heart scene. That is very Egyptian. And sometimes we have everything in one diagram. That's very interesting. We have here Nut, for example. We also have the planets, our northern group, the zodiac or the personal horoscope, and also the addition of these four winds at the corner of the coffin. And references to these four winds date back to the pyramid texts. However, these iconographies, or they're only depicted in the Greco-Roman period. And on zodiac ceilings, or these ceilings that only show the zodiac, we see that the planets are integrated along with the elements of the zodiac. And previously, the planets took the form of a human body and a falcon head. However, here they tend to come in bird forms. For example, the planet Jupiter has the body of a bird, the head of a falcon, and two horns. The planet Saturn has the head of a bull. The planet Mars has a peculiar head and a tail of a snake. And at the beginning of my presentation, I mentioned also that sometimes the celestial diagrams decorate the exterior surface of water clocks. A very important water clock was found fragmented in Karnak, dating to the reign of Amenhotep III. So the composition or the arrangement of the celestial diagram follows a three-register format. The upper one, or the first one, of course, has these decans, the clusters, the planets. And at the center of the middle register, we have the northern group and the circumpolar constellation of the bull. And the final register here features several scenes of the pharaoh Amenhotep III presenting offerings to different deities. And of course, in the middle, we have the figure of a seated baboon, another form of the god Thoth, the lord of counting and calendars and timekeeping. And interestingly is that this three-register format, or this water clock format, is replicated again in two temples, Temple of Ramesses and the Temple of Medinet Habu. Again, here we have our three registers. We have our clusters, our planets, the northern group, and this third register featuring the pharaoh before different deities. And also we have here this water clock feature of a baboon seated on the jet pillar. Unfortunately, we don't know why these two ceilings, why these two temple ceilings were copied or were perhaps influenced from a water clock diagram. But perhaps it's another way of mimicking the sky. Yeah, I hope that you enjoyed my presentation. And I'm very glad to be here today presenting virtually. And please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you so much. It was really fascinating. Thank you. Canon, do we have questions there in the room?
Yes, any questions? Okay, why don't we start with those on Zoom? And if anyone here has any questions, feel free.
Yes, absolutely. We have a couple of questions by Marie. Could early celestial observations and recordings, for instance, Dickens, point to the importance of identifying seasons for an agrarian-based culture?
I think these Dickens were mainly for timekeeping. I'm not really an expert on the Dickens. I just study these celestial diagrams from an iconographic perspective. But what we know is that these Dickens were used for the measurement of the 24 hours and also for keeping track of the weekdays, or the division of the week into a 10-day period.
Thank you. And the second question is, could the double sides of the ceilings point to day, night, or summer, winter?
We unfortunately don't have any evidence for this. I was just proposing that this is how they visualize the sky from different viewpoints, perhaps, but they usually depict the sky from at night.
Thank you. But we have a third question. So if in the room there are no questions, I would like to take the opportunity to ask this one as well. Could the study of the constellations point to solar or stellar or perhaps lunar observations?
Well, lunar observations are a bit attested later on in the Greco-Roman period. But the New Kingdom diagrams, it's quite difficult, and it's actually quite difficult to identify these constellations. I think the only one that can be identified with a great certainty is the constellation of the Bull. It's now interpreted as the circumpolar constellation of the Big Dipper or the Great Bear. But other ones, they're very, very challenging. It's extremely difficult to identify which constellation this is.
Thank you so much. We have another question. So can I go on and ask two questions actually?
Yes, yes, feel free.
Great. One from Arthur. Is there any evidence that the Egyptians used the stellar representations to differentiate the seasons?
Differentiate the seasons? No, unfortunately, this is very interesting, but unfortunately, I don't have evidence. Yeah, too bad. But actually, so on the last two diagrams I showed from the Temple of the Ramesseum and Medinat Habu, there is a line before the first register, and it lists down the seasons, like the first month of Perit and so on. Yeah, this is the only thing I can think of. But the other diagrams, no, there is no mention to the months or the seasons, unfortunately.
Thank you. And the last question here in the Q&A is by Giuseppe Facchetti. The 12 circles in the Senenmut's tomb have been interpreted as the 12 months. What are then the 24 slices they show?
Yes, each circle is divided into 24 sectors, and this has been interpreted also as the 24 hours of the day.
Thank you, great. Thank you so much.
Do we have
a question in person? So if we have time for that, we have a question here.
Sorry. When I was visiting Egypt and I went to some of the tombs, the ceilings were painted quite bright in blue, and there was like representations of day and night where like one is swallowed and the other one then comes about. Can you sort of explain why they sort of did it like that?
I'm really sorry. I'm not sure which ceilings you are referring.
Quite a few temples, they had ceilings painted in like blue paint,
Yes.
And then they had like depictions of almost like a body that's like a snake-like body, and it's swallowing, like one is swallowing the day, the other one's swallowing the night. So it's kind of giving the representations of the day and night.
Yeah, these represent, I mean, perhaps the ancient Egyptians were very curious about what happened to the sun during the night. So, I mean, the way they interpreted this is that there is a body that swallows the sun during the night and gives birth to it each morning. And these scenes are also found in tombs. They're found in a number of contexts. They're found in tombs as well. And the way we think of it is that the ancient Egyptians were trying to visualize what happens to the sun during the night. I hope this answers you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Any other questions?